And now, the best 60-ish seconds of your week.
And the dog days of summer arrive a little bit early this year. We've had some oppressive heat the last couple of weeks, and it looks like it's going to continue. And the heat continues to get turned up on the Biden corruption machine. This week, Hunter Biden's plea deal was blown up by a federal judge in Delaware. Look, we said all along that this was a sweetheart deal concocted for him by a Justice Department that wanted to cover up an awful lot of things. What we didn't know, none of us did, was that contained in that plea agreement was a perpetual immunity for Hunter Biden against all other crimes. Imagine that. And a federal judge just said, whoa, wait a minute. And now Biden's faced with some difficult choices. And more we hear about the business dealings of Hunter Biden, in addition to his storied career as an artist, and how much linkage there is to the big guy himself. And as document after document and witness after witness comes forward, the story gets to be a lot tougher for the sitting president of the United States. And now there's talk of impeachment. This is interesting because we've heard, from the Democrats so much about the Trump indictments, but we haven't heard much about the Biden document investigation, which still hasn't concluded, and where that might lead. With Trump, it led to an indictment. Whether or not that's a real indictment that turns up at trial to be convincing to a jury remains to be seen. But there's another story yet to be written about Joe Biden's document retention as well, in addition to all of this other stuff. Kevin McCarthy is now at least entertaining the notion of impeachment. And while many on my side of the aisle are rejoicing over that, I'm still just a tiny bit skeptical personally, because we've never had an impeachment in this country that led to removal of a president. And bluntly, we won't this time either, because the Democrats control the Senate, and there certainly isn't a two-thirds majority over there to remove Joe Biden from office. And he has the ultimate insurance policy in Kamala Harris. Nobody wants that. But an impeachment vote might put folks on record against this administration and all that's been going on. But let me suggest a couple of impeachments that should take precedence over even impeachment talk of Biden himself. And that is Merrick Garland, who has turned out to be a disaster at justice, who has turned the Justice Department into a political weapon, something we've said all along should never happen. When the justice system, and the criminal justice system in particular, are weaponized and politicized, everybody should be frightened. And even before Merrick Garland, how about Alejandro Mayorkas, who went to Congress this week and once again was so incredibly arrogant. Sitting there, the body language is so telling. He sits there with his chin held high as if to look down on the great unwashed masses of political opposition to him, where question after question, he just refuses to answer. He's asked a simple yes or no question, he wants to go into a soliloquy about how great he is or deliver a lecture to the members of Congress. Mayorkas either simply doesn't want to answer or doesn't know the most fundamental questions about his mismanagement of the southern border. Every time he's asked a specific question, he refuses to give an answer or says, we'll get back to you with that data. And the members of Congress were very clear in saying, you've told us that before, but that information is never forthcoming. He knows the answer. We all know that he knows the answer, but he doesn't want to say so, because then he's exposed for the fraud that he is and the fraud that this administration is perpetrating on the American people by telling us that the southern border is secure. It's anything but. And all of this comes into the context of the border crossing efforts of the governor of Texas, and in particular, his barricades along the Rio Grande. My Democrat counterparts, particularly the progressive left Democrats, are saying that this is a cruel thing. That's so terrible. And I said very simply, the solution is don't cross the river. And if you want to talk about cruelty, what was happening before Governor Abbott put those barricades in were dozens and dozens and dozens of deaths by drowning, including bodies washing up on farmers' lands, etc. Those have been cut roughly in a third because of what Governor Abbott's doing. It's going to be a big folderol now under federal law. the Biden administration wants to invoke the Rivers Act or some such thing. It just gets crazier and crazier, because ultimately, if you don't have a border, you really don't have a country. And the southern border has become a sieve under this administration, and there's no real effort underway to prevent it from continuing, except by folks like Greg Abbott. And from crazy to crazier, this week we heard from a whistleblower about UFOs. Of course, the United States government doesn't call them that, but a former Air Force officer testified at great length about some of the efforts by the United States government over a long period of time. This isn't Roswell, by the way. This is much more recent stuff, but he says, in his judgment, there's information in there for extraterrestrial life dating back almost 100 years. We'll have to see what comes of all that, but in a crazy week, why not throw that in as well? And the boys of summer are at it, and this week in Major League Baseball, as the races head into the final 60 games, 3 pretty interesting records. First of all, the Atlanta Braves pull off the first 8-3-5 triple play. Think about that. Center field to first base to third for a triple play against the hapless Boston Red Sox that night. Some really sloppy base running. The first time in 140 years. Basically, since modern baseball has existed, the first time that has happened. And the Washington Nationals, mired in last place, pull off an interesting one, coming up with 4 consecutive games where they scored 4 runs in the last 2 innings. One of those games they still managed to lose, but an interesting little stat there. The first time that's happened in an awfully long time. And our own beloved Philadelphia Phillies, Bryson Stott, pulls off something that hadn't happened in 30 years, not going back quite as far, but something he shares with only 11 other major leaguers, including, greats like Rickey Henderson, Ozzie Smith, Lou Brock, by getting 4 walks and 3 steals in a single game. One of only a dozen major league players to ever do that, and the first in the last 30 years. And finally, before we go, next week we will have the summer reading list, and we ask something of you. We don't do this every week, and we should, and I'm going to try to start doing it. Please, subscribe. Most important, hit that subscribe button, especially on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. You'll know about what we're going to say before it's said. You get previews of the Saturday morning Best 60, and you'll do us a favor by helping to grow our audience and letting your friends share in the best 60-ish seconds of your week.